I think the guitar sound that we're all accustomed to is an amplifier, a speaker, and a cabinet with an SM57 right up against a grill cloth, but there are so many other options out there. And in fact, the amp, cab, speaker, SM57 might not always be the best setup. Here are some clips that look at an amp versus different amp technologies. I don't want you to think about which one you like better. I want you to see if you can spot which one is the real amp speaker 57 and which ones are the simulations. Take a look. So this isn't going to be a video of what sounds better, but it's going to be an interesting video looking at, can you tell which one is really a real amp? And by real amp, I mean amp, speaker, mic, down a mic line into a console board, right? That's the guitar sound that we all know and are familiar with on all of our favorite records. But so many other solutions exist. So can we actually tell the difference anymore in a signal path? There are some technologies that model an amp. There are some technologies that model a cabinet, a speaker, a microphone, and there are some things that bring it all together. I'm starting to realize that depending upon the gig, the situation, is it a rehearsal scenario, is it a small stage, a big stage, am I using in-ears? That all plays into what might be the best rig to bring to the gig. I guess the first thing to start thinking about would be, what is the guitar playing experience? What is the guitar sound? What is the audience here? Is guitar just the sound of the instrument? Is guitar the sound and the feel of the instrument? Because depending upon where you sit on each piece of that may put you into one camp or another. And we're going to start to get into that. In my own experience, I've used everything from a cranked amp on stage where the amp is the only thing supplying the stage volume and volume to the audience, all the way to an amp in a box solution where the only way I'm hearing guitar is through my in-ear monitors. I've also used shades of gray in between. And so this video is not meant to be an in-detail gear review, but I did want to go through some of the features of some of the options that we have available to us. So let's take a look at the first option. The first option is a Fender 68 Deluxe Reverb reissue. It's a 2-channel amplifier where it's got a Bassman-esque voice channel and a vintage voice channel. It's 22 watts through two 6v6 power tubes. And then it's a 1x12 cabinet configuration where it's got a 70-watt Celestion V-type speaker in it. The sound that you heard, it was recorded with an SM57 about 1 inch from the grill cloth, as shown here. Also, you could see the settings of the amplifier used in the sound clips that you heard. The second thing that we're looking at is a 2-Notes Captor X unit. This unit allows you to use your own amplifier and feed the speaker output of the amp into this unit. This unit is both a load box and a DI simulation box. What it does inside of the software is it simulates a cabinet, speaker, microphone, room interaction. It comes with a pretty sophisticated app that you can Bluetooth to your phone or plug it into a computer, and it allows you to change everything from speaker type, cabinet type, to put in your own cabinet simulations, to change microphone placement, front of the cabinet, back of the cabinet, change the distance of the microphone type, all kinds of things, as well as adding some studio effects after room configurations, reverb configurations, some saturation, as well as EQ configurations, all within inside of the digital world that this box lives in. It is also a physical load box, so it has 3 levels of attenuation built in. This box allows you to have no stage volume while using a real amplifier. It also allows you to go all the way to feeding through with no attenuation and just using the XLR outputs with all the modeled software inside of it. The third option we're going to look at is a Universal Audio Dream 65. This is an amp in a box solution. This is the ultimate no stage volume type of scenario. There is no more amplifier on stage. All of the amplifier modeling is done inside of this stomp box. It's actually designed to be just another pedal on your pedal board. It's got 1/4-inch inputs, 1/4-inch outputs. It's got stereo feed-through capabilities if you're looking for a stereo image to be maintained. But more importantly, it also models the amplifier itself. There are other options out there that are like this, just like a Strymon Iridium, but for the sake of this video, and I happen to land on really liking the Universal Audio stomp boxes. So this includes multiple cabinets that you can flip between. It also includes a very detailed model of a Fender Deluxe Reverb, a 65 Deluxe Reverb, but you can change the cabinets within the software. The software itself allows you to Bluetooth onto a phone, and then you can call up certain presets and change certain settings, or save presets that you set on the physical pedal itself. This is the fully modeled situation. This video is really all about thinking through the considerations that you have in your situation and what type of a rig makes the most sense given the gig you're showing up to. So one of the first scenarios that I think we have to think about is, where does singing fit on your priority level? If you're singing and playing guitar, what do you want to hear more of? What do you want to hear in more detail? Now, it's hard to play guitar without hearing it. It's also really hard to sing without hearing it. So if I have a small stage wedge out front, but I have a massive amplifier that's kicking off all kinds of volume, am I going to be able to compete there and hear the vocals the way I need to? Now, that's not everybody's scenario, but it's very possible that if you think through, maybe I want a smaller amp, or maybe I want something where I could decrease the volume on stage and put out a bunch of front of house signal so that I don't have to have my stage wedges really compete with a guitar amp. That flows right into a second consideration, which is, what is your monitoring scenario? And this is a huge consideration, because do you have a monitor specific to guitar and specific to vocals, or instruments and vocals? Because that allows a whole lot more clarity between vocals and instrumentation. Are you using in-ears? And I think that in-ears is probably the biggest consideration relative to what type of guitar rig is worth it in your particular situation. It has been my experience that with in-ears, if you have in-ears that fit really well, that do provide a good sound, but also really, really minimize any sort of bleed from the stage volume into your ears, you have lost most of the feel part of guitar playing, especially if you're playing on a big stage. Because if you walk all the way across the stage on the far side of the drum kit from your amp, which is pointed no longer even remotely near you or toward you, and you have in-ears in your ears, you're just not feeling that amp anymore. There is no feel from that amp anymore. And of course, I'm not talking about Angus or Malcolm Young with 12 4x12 cabinets on stage shaking the stage. But for you and I, or any normal situation, I think we have to think about, how much do I really feel of the amp anymore in my scenario? Or at this gig, what is appropriate? How loud can I have that amp? And if the answer is, well, I'm not really going to feel that anymore, then it's all about sound. And I think we are at a point now where you could bring a Universal Audio pedal on stage with you, or some of the other amp modeling pedals that are out there, drastically reduce what you're bringing to a gig, and have just as good, if not a better experience with that rig. So I think your monitoring situation and whether or not you're isolating yourself from the amp to begin with is a huge consideration for the best rig to bring out there. So let's talk about logistics, right? I think this is interesting too, because that Deluxe Reverb is, I don't know, 40 pounds, give or take. An AC-15 is nearly 50 pounds by itself. My 1x12 cabinet Dr. Z head combo, that's a good 60 or 70 pounds. So is that something that you need to drag out to a gig? Because that UA pedal is probably less than a pound. Do you want to try a wet-dry rig? That requires 2 amplifiers. So now take 100 pounds plus worth of amplifiers or stage area required to set that up. Is that something that's worth it, given maybe it's a small pub gig this time? Maybe I'll save the wet-dry rig for the outdoor venue I'm playing next week, but this week in the small pub, again, it's probably worth just bringing the pedal. So that's a really interesting consideration, are all the logistics. Is it somebody else that has to carry your amps for you? Maybe then you care less, I don't know. But you might want to think about the logistics going in as to what solution you choose. I think debugging and how good you are at debugging digital and analog stuff in the heat of the moment plays in terms of a consideration, because the pedal and the 2-notes unit have digital stuff going on. So there's just things that can glitch. So it is worth thinking about, do you want to have that level of debugging possible? Or if the sound isn't what you expected it coming out of the Captor X unit, are you savvy enough in a moment's notice to be able to pick up your phone or a tablet on stage and fix what went wrong? Do you have a sound guy running this stuff, so maybe none of that matters? Maybe it's easier for a sound guy out in front of house to adjust something inside of a digital app connected wirelessly than it would be to run up on stage and change a setting on the amplifier. That's something that's very possible in the digital units that you couldn't do with a tube amp. So the whole debugging, altering settings, mid-gig, mid-set is something worth thinking about. There is a controversial consideration, and that's, who is all of this for? Is all of this for you as the musician on stage? Is the whole show about you as a guitarist? If you're in a 3-piece blues band, then maybe it is. But if you're in a 5 or 6-piece cover band with keyboards and 2 other guitars and an acoustic guitar and vocals and backing vocals, you definitely have a certain place that you have to sit in. So a 4x12 cranked is probably not going to put you where you need to be. And so again, I would ask, are you doing this for you, or are you doing this for the audience? And this is controversial because the truth is, if you're doing this for the audience, then you should be all about the rig that gives you the best mix as a band and not the best sound as a guitarist. And that is a huge consideration. And I think it takes a long time to get over the fact that a gig is just not all about us as guitarists. Again, if you find yourself in a situation where the gig is all about you, then I want to be in your band. But the reality is, it just isn't, and I think we're all better for knowing that we need to fit in a certain spot. I would much rather hear my vocals clearly in a mix than necessarily care that every chord is crystal clear on the guitar. Again, it's just all about priority order here. I think we do have to ask ourselves, who are we doing this for? Is it for us, or is it for the band, or is it for the audience? And that needs to drive some of our considerations for sure. And one of the last generic scenarios that I want us to think about is, what kind of sound reinforcement situation are we walking into? Because that'll play a role ultimately in what rig I bring. Am I supplying my own PA at the corner pub this weekend, doing our own monitor mixes? Maybe. Am I walking onto a huge stage where we're going to get a front of house engineer as well as a monitor engineer off to the side? Maybe. And so I know in certain situations with the big stage and 2 live sound engineers, I could bring whatever I want and get a pretty reasonable result. They may eye roll if I want to keep the amp loud on stage, but they're there to do it. If we're supplying our own sound at the pub, can we mix well enough where I can get a sound out of a pedal or out of a silent stage? Or do we want some stage volume so the front of house has to do less so that our little PA can really handle vocals? Those are all, the gear around how we're getting a mix as a band does play into thoughts and considerations behind the guitar rig. Can we separate, what if we have 2 or 3 guitarists and we all want to go direct? Can we separate out? Do we have software EQ? Is it an analog board that we can each EQ ourselves into a little spot to sit? And that can be a real struggle. And we need to think about that going into what rig we're going to bring and what our setup looks like. And so I don't think there are any conclusions from this video necessarily. The whole point is there's more to consider than simply how does the YouTube video sound. I think a guitar experience is the sound and it's the feel. And I think your monitoring situation, I think the stages you're playing, I think the band you're in, I think that all plays into what the best live rig might be for your situation. And so I'm going to leave you now with the reveal of what those clips were right here. So maybe you guessed right, maybe you didn't, and that might tell you certain something. But I'm also going to put a couple clips after this that show these different things. It's going to flip back and forth between, real amp and microphone, all into the Captor X unit, and then also the UA pedal itself that I'm using here. And you could see if you can guess. I'll do the reveal after those clips too, but you could take a guess and see if you figure out which one was recorded, which way. And that'll be fun. Leave your answers in the comments. Let me know if you were able to figure out which was which before. Maybe it was obvious to you guys. I was certainly surprised. If you like these videos, do me a favor and like the video and subscribe to the channel so that I can keep making all this awesome content. Having a blast, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.